In this video, I'm going to show you how to name angles. Unfortunately, they're not called things like Bob, Betty, Brenda or Brian. Instead, you need to have a mathematical process to name them. Each angle is made up of two arms. This is an arm, and here's the second. You could remember what they're called arms. If you wanted to, we'll add a couple of fingers and hands onto the end. So there's my two arms for my angle. Let's label these arms. Let's say that this point here is going to be A. Let's say that this point here is going to be B, and this point here is going to be C. So I wanted to label this angle. I just follow the journey that I'm going to take. I'm going to go from this arm, so I'm going to start at A, I'm going to come down to the central point at B, and then I'm going to finish off my journey at C. So I would label this angle as angle A, B, C. And the angle ABC is more than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. So the angle ABC is obtuse. Angles become more difficult to name if we've got more arms. On this particular example, I've got three arms that I could be using. So I have got this one, and this one, and this one. I'm going to give them all a label. So I'm going to say that this I'm going to call A, I'm going to call this central point B, I'm going to call this C, and I'm going to call this D. I'm going to use those letters to label the various different angles I've got on the sheet. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to travel from A down to B and out to C. So looking at this angle here. So that angle could be marked on there. So that's the angle that I want to name and to characterise. So I'd start off at the side by saying it's an angle. So I do my angle sign. It's an angle. I'm starting at A. And from A, I'm travelling down to B, so B is my central letter, and then from B, I'm taking the route which goes out to C. So that angle is called angle ABC. And that angle is less than 90 degrees, so that angle is going to be acute. If I have a look at a different angle on this, perhaps this time I'm going to start at C. So I'm going to go from C to B to D. So if I was labeling that angle, I would start with angle, and it's starting at point C. It's travelling from C down to B, so then it's going to B in the centre, and then from B it's travelling out to D. So that one is going to be angle CBD. And CBD is also less than 90 degrees, so that's acute. A third angle that I could name on here is going to start at A, is going to travel to B, and is going to go out to D. So if I'm looking at that angle, I'm going to start off with my angle sign, and I'm saying I'm starting at arm A, and from arm A, I'm travelling down to centre point B, and from B, I'm taking a route which goes out from B out to D. So angle is angle ABD. Angle ABD is more than 90 degrees, so angle ABD is obtuse. So here I have a more complicated diagram again, and this time I'm going to say that down here I have got point A. I'm going to say that this is point B, this is C, this is D, this is E, this is F, and this centre point I'm going to label G. So if I wanted to describe some of the angles on here, if I wanted to start at C, travel down to G and go out to E, that angle would be angle CGE. And angle C to G to E is less than 90 degrees, and it would be acute. If I wanted to do a larger angle, I could do B coming down to G and going off to E, for example. So this angle would be BGE. I could do an angle of AGE. So you just need to say the angle point that you're starting, the point that you're travelling to, and your end point to label your angle. It does get slightly more complicated than that, and this is when we introduce reflex angles. Reflex angles are angles which are more than 180 degrees. So they are between 180 degrees and 360 degrees. It's in that range. So if I wanted to find a reflex angle, it would be marked on my, I'm going to mark it on my diagram here. So if, let's have a blue pen. So if I was starting here, and if I wanted to measure the angle, the reflex angle of CGE, it would be that. So it's that outside angle that I've just drawn. So it's more than 180 degrees, and it starts at C, and it goes all the way through G and back around to E. So instead of doing the internal bit, this would be called reflex angle CGE. And we'd write that as reflex angle CGE, but it's the reflex one that we want, which means the outside or the external angle. So here we've got our diagram again, and this time I'm going to be thinking about angle EGF. So if I record that down here, I'm looking at angle EGF. What I might need to do is to put my protractor on and to measure angle EGF. Once I've measured angle EGF, one important point for you to realise is if I perhaps worked out EGF and if I measured that with protractor and I decided that was about 50 degrees, then if I wanted to work out the reflex angle of EGF, which would be that space around there, and that would be written down as reflex angle EGF, then what that should be is 360 degrees minus the 50 degrees. So I'd expect that angle to come out at 310 degrees. If they don't both add up, I love that bell. If they don't both add up to 360 degrees, you know you've gone wrong somewhere. So when you're measuring your angles with your protractors, do check that your internal angle and your external angle both add up to 360 degrees. So this one here would be my internal angle on angle EFG, and this would be my reflex angle on EGF, sorry. So just to clarify, finally, you'd start at the point of the arm that you're travelling from. So this is point B. I travel to the centre, G, and then I name the arm that I leave on, so D. So this angle would be BGD. If I wanted the external one, it would be reflex BG and round to D. So hopefully you can now label your angles. Please watch the second video on how to really accurately use your protractor and then start tonight's homework.